All right, suppose we can get started. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, you're fine.
All right, cool. So quick intro if people haven't joined us before. I'm Kevin. It's just like a little virtual user group. Hope it's not one person presenting. Hopefully everybody contributes and talk. It's just a general conversation about Ceph and our use cases of mostly scientific computing or really big clusters, stuff like that. Um, there's a pad link in the chat. If you haven't signed in, please do that. Or if you're not comfortable putting your information down, you don't have to. It's totally up to you. There's some topics on there that I tried to, come up with to keep a conversation going. It looks like a bunch of people have added stuff, so that's really good. So I guess to start with, does anybody have anything particularly important that they'd want to discuss with the group or anything like that? Otherwise, I'm just going to start picking some stuff from the list here and see what we can get going.
Okay, before you get into it, Kevin, this is Liam Monahan.
You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Hey, Liam.
Hey, so this is my first time trying the user group, but I saw it on the mailing list, and that seemed like a cool idea. So thanks for organizing. I guess I just have like a general question before we start. How many repeat customers do you get coming to these, or is it other people's first time?
I mean, this is like only the third one that we've done so far. This is usually maybe like I think 10 to 15 people on. I'd have to go back and look at the lists of the previous pads to double check. I think last time it was kind of small, but hopefully we get repeat customers. I mean, I'd like to think that we're slightly interesting.
There's definitely a lot of people, I think, in this community that are looking for how to run a bigger cluster. We've had our cluster for maybe about
5 years, 6 years.
longer, 7 years,
6 years,
6 years, something like that. What's the capacity of it? It's like 3.5 petabytes of raw storage. We run Rados Gateway, Ceph. We've tried RBD, but we don't really do a lot of that anymore. And we're at about 1.47 billion objects in Ceph right now. So, anyway, I don't want to hijack this too much, but I just wanted to introduce us.
Yeah, that's great. I should have done that. Like, if anybody wants to introduce themselves, feel free to go ahead and do that. It's good to have a little background. What's your primary use case? Like scientific computing, cloud, or what's being done?
Scientific computing is what we're focused mostly on. The Rados Gateway component is mostly for a sort of on-premise object storage, and Cephafs is fronted by a very large GPU cluster at the moment doing machine learning.
Very cool.
Hi, Kevin. I've just checked. Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yep. Hey, Tom.
Okay, great. Cool. Hi there. Hi. Yeah. So it's my name's Tom Bennett. I'm from Sarau in Cape Town, South Africa. Luckily, this is the first time I'm calling in, so I ended up joining a bit late because I realized I didn't have BlueGene installed in my BlueGene's installed in my on my current laptop. So the last time I used it was on a different laptop. So sorry, I ended up joining the meeting a bit late. Kevin, thanks for organizing this. It's also I was also very intrigued just to kind of join in and see what the meetings were about. Sorao runs a telescope called Meerkat, which is now the most powerful radio telescope in the world. And we use Ceph to store the data coming out of the telescope. We actually use Ceph now in several different places. We basically have a couple of 100 million objects now. We mostly use S3. We exclusively use S3 at the moment. We are thinking of setting up some CephFS as well. Our main use case is S3 to store data to store and serve data, or to store data from the telescope and serve data to the radio astronomy community.
Very cool. Anybody else? All right. I guess one thing that kind of wanted to hit was like cephalocon's coming up. Dan from CERN and I traded a couple emails of the idea of like a birds of a feather, a panel with some sort of get together with the scientific computing folks. This whole idea of doing this call kind of came out of the last Cephalocon, Barcelona, where we kind of just got together after the day was over and started chatting and thought it'd be cool to keep in touch every couple months through a call. So I don't know if people are interested in doing that thing again. I don't know who's going. I'm not attending this year, so it's a little hard for me to organize it. I'm not sure who is. So if anybody's interested in doing that, I'm sure we can figure something out.
Hi, everyone. It's Julian from CERN. Dan cannot make it to the call today because of conflicting meetings. But on this panel thing, apparently it's thought to be a bit late now for the next Cephalocon. He will attend, he will be there. But he said, well, maybe if we have like big science users, it might still be possible, but it's a bit complicated. However, he said maybe a further session seemed feasible. So I don't know if like you guys are going, and I think this is still possible to organize. So this is the message you wanted to carry on that topic.
All right.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I was at the meetup at Barcelona. It was extremely useful, kind of getting to meet people. I said it was pretty useful. I won't be going to Cephalocon this year, but if we can find funding, we will be sending one of my colleagues, Sean February, who's also in on this meeting. If he's going, it would certainly be great to have a birds of a feather session there. If we are going, I could certainly I can ask Sean if he can set up a birds of the feather session. Because Kevin, you're saying you're not going to be there, so I can. Hopefully I can volunteer Sean's services, but that depends on whether we're going or not.
That'd be great. If you said Sean wanted to do that, if he was there, maybe I don't know if they're gonna do like those impromptu birds of a feather at the end of the day again. You could do something like that, or I don't know if people just want to get together for a dinner or something after the conference one of the nights. I guess keep that in mind. So that way, face-to-face time is always nice. So other than that, anybody just going to go hit some items on the list here. How are things going with Nautilus with everybody? Any problems? I know I saw some people hitting Ceph Manager, kind of spinning 100% CPU, but not really causing problems. And was that 14.2.5? Any thoughts?
It seems like there are multiple issues that kind of arose in 14.2.5. So we have been on Nautilus for a while, since the maybe the first point release of 14.2. And then we were running on 14.2.3 and up until leapfrogging to 14.2.6 earlier last week. The main issue that we hit at the University of Maryland was long heartbeats on both the cluster network and the public network. It doesn't really look like there is a lot of packet loss on these networks. They're pretty over provisioned for what they're doing. So we were just wondering if anybody else who's upgraded to 14.2.5 or 14.2.6 has seen this creep in. They're kind of annoying errors, but we're just not sure how seriously to take them or what sort of tunables you can fiddle with to make them go away if they're not a legitimate problem.
As far as I can tell, we upgraded like most of our cluster to 14.2.6. We do see sometimes these longer bit messages, but like it's really occasional, and I would say every time we see them, usually that we often like see an actual network problem on our side. So I mean, I don't know exactly, like maybe we can like share the configs or follow up on this, but we don't really see them like that often.
So how often is not that often? Like once a week one pops up, or what do you think is typical? I mean, it hasn't been around for that long, these warnings, only
December.
Well,
early December.
I don't think it's like that frequent. It's like usually really when we see like that there is a network like problem and outage or something, we see them coming, but it's not something that recurrent, I would say.
Okay, so maybe there is a deeper network problem that we kind of need to look into. Okay.
Yeah, our
Is this
experience
just
with
the
with
OSD?
with the Nautilus is that there's a bunch of things that are sort of being sort of provided as information that is being tuned down, it seems like, that are sort of bringing these errors or issues in for us. And we're just either, as a large enough cluster, I guess, hitting or sort of have been sort of at these sort of high water marks maybe that they've decided as the developers as sort of, where to warn or sort of talk. So we're sort of seeing a bunch of these crop into our cluster. And again, the question is, are we on the wrong side of this in terms of our capacities or configurations, or are we, we're just sort of, are we driving the car too fast, and that's something that we're sort of seeing with Nautilus a little bit.
How many OSDs are in your cluster?
732.
Yeah. I know there's a bunch of tunables for the heartbeats. I think I've fiddled with mine in the past. I think I ended up shortening some of them.
Sure. Did that reward you?
Ago.
Yeah. Okay.
It worked for the problem that I was trying to troubleshoot at the time. I'm only on Mimic right now with my big cluster. I was planning on going to Nautilus later this week or maybe next week. And I can let you know we have about 900 OSDs. So the heartbeat issues, I'll know somebody else has seen it.
I'll let you know about one other thing we saw going to Nautilus was we started getting complaints about large OMAP objects. When immediately after we did an upgrade in Nautilus, we started getting scrubs come back with that error, and we determined that it really seemed fine to us, so we pushed that tunable up for the large OMAP threshold. Another thing to be aware of if you have one of these, a cluster that's shaped like ours.
Sorry, did you tune the large OMAP threshold up or down?
We pushed it up. Yeah.
Did you assume your cluster has enough memory to enable that?
Yeah, we sit around about 4 gigs per OSD on the cluster on the node side. So, and again, we've sort of iterated. This cluster has morphed. I guess the one of the best things about Ceph is that this cluster used to be shaped significantly different with a core ratio and a memory ratio that was different, and we sort of have adjusted that with either moving or adding capacity and hardware into the cluster. So. But so far, we have not hit any issue with the with tuning that OMAP, and then we didn't tune it significantly beyond its thing because essentially we wanted it to not we were in a state where it's essentially we were not getting warnings pre-upgrade, right. And then as soon as we upgraded, there didn't seem to be any degradation or issues other than the warnings, and obviously that's problematic from trying to sort of understand if there are critical issues in the cluster. So we tuned it up just a little bit over where the default was set in that release of Nautilus.
Great, thanks. Just a general question. We haven't still running on Luminous, and we're wanting to take one of our test clusters up to Nautilus. Is there a particular version of Nautilus you recommend over and above? I'm just wondering if we should stick with one of the lower versions, or if we should just go with what the current latest version is.
We've been spending the most time running on 14.2.3, but that was mostly because I think a lot of the release notes for other versions really didn't have things that we thought we were affected for. But it seems like all of the recent patch releases have just been bug fixes, so I would probably just recommend going to those releases.
Yeah, well, I thought there were a couple bugs introduced in like 2.4 or 2.5.
Right, some of them were fixing regressions. Yep.
Yeah.
They're probably the latest, the safest.
2.6 fixed some of that stuff up and cleaned it up. I mean, I don't think it's anything terribly critical, but kind of just more annoying things.
Right.
I plan on going directly to 14.2.6.
14.2.6 here, and so far, so we don't see like any big problem. The only thing we had is a real issue with the MDS when we upgraded them. When we enabled Messenger version 2, that made them all like spinning and restarting. So we had to like restarting them like one by one for it to work. So there is like I think a tracker issue open. I'll see if I can find the link. But so far, no major issue, all good. Actually, all good. And actually, the only cluster we didn't upgrade it yet is our S3 cluster, and which runs Luminous now. And I was wondering if like any of you have like upgraded straight from Luminous to Nautilus, because that's something we did on the test cluster and that we plan to do. So I was wondering if any of you has done this already.
Yeah, we actually about to. We've got a 16-node cluster which we haven't integrated into our bigger cluster yet. We're using it as a test cluster, and I'm planning to upgrade Nautilus directly from Luminous to Nautilus on that. So I could certainly we can share experiences with how that goes. It's currently all using Ceph Ansible, but it's our own little. We've got a few differences to our Ceph Ansible that we do from the current Ceph Ansible, but I can certainly let you know basically how our upgrade goes. And that's
on the S3 side, as only because the big thing we have going on is like we're trying to set up like a multi-region S3, and like we're still in early stages of planning this. But I was wondering if like any of you had experiences with like multi-region S3 already, or any major incident or like problem when setting this up, or.
Sorry, Julian. You were. It was a bit. Yeah, it was a bit difficult here. Can you just repeat your question again? I assume you're asking me, right?
So, can you hear me now, or? So, basically, I was asking if any of you has been setting up a multi-region S3, because that's something we have, let's say, in the process where we want to do this also, and we are still early stages, so we are collecting experience. So I don't know if any has been playing with the multi-region S3 already.
Yeah, we use S3. We haven't used the multi-region stuff yet. Yeah.
Anything anybody else wants to say about Nautilus? Yeah.
Particular for me. All right. Just try to. Oh, Tom Barron, like he's on the call, and I tried to bug him a couple months ago about they were doing a really big expansion on their 40 petabyte cluster, which is already quite big, and they were having some problems with the OSD maps taking too long to just minutes for any sort of change, if I recall correctly. I was wondering if you could share anything on that, or how things are going for them with their massive cluster.
Yeah, hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sweet. Cool. Yeah, so, I mean, you pretty summed it up pretty well there. I think last time I chatted to anybody about it, we were having our OSD map creation after we moved over to UpMap was up in it was 10 plus seconds for a new OSD map, which when you're peering means you spend a long time waiting for new OSD maps. But we moved over to it was sort of basically Luminous 12.2.12 plus a bit, like a pre-release version that had a bunch, basically multi-threaded all the UpMap stuff, which got our OSD map creation back down to sensible times. So cluster's been pretty happy since then, and we've been adding. I think we had around somewhere between 5 and 10 petabytes. I'm not actually sure how many OSDs it was to put into it, and we're about halfway through that. It hasn't been as much fun. There's been a lot of niggling hardware problems, like nothing actually Ceph related. So we haven't been able to dump a load of OSDs in at the same time. But I think we just put in 10 storage nodes today of like 24 OSDs, 24, I think these are 8 terabyte drives. And that backfilling is actually going on now, and it's all going pretty smoothly. We've done it a few different ways the last times for these like big additions, messing around with like up mapping everything off and then letting the balancer move things back on. I think we're just keeping it simple and quick this time, just dumping stuff in, dumping everything in at full weight and just letting Ceph balance it in. We're not pushed for space at the moment, so we're not worried about things ending up over full before the balancer can bring them back into line, so we can just stick stuff in and let Ceph deal with it. The main problem we have with that is like the Mon stores. They tend to grow pretty rapidly with the cluster this big, so we're sitting at like, I think it's 20 something gig now, and I'm guessing they'll get to sort of 50 gig before we're back to health okay and we can actually compact them again, which is something that's a bit annoying. But apart from that, it all handles it pretty smoothly. There's not really much to worry about. So yeah, I think that's probably sums it
Hey,
up.
Tom,
Hey,
can I ask you something interesting about what you just said about the balancer?
yeah,
So, do you run selectively with the balancer on and then other times off? So you'll have it on when you're expanding the cluster, but not during normal operation? Is
no,
that what
we
you're
run it. No, we as
constantly?
much as possible we will run it all the
Yeah.
time.
Right.
What I think I talked about it at Barcelona. I sort of experimented with using the balancer to effectively add more hardware in. So you add new hardware at full weight. Using the script that Dan at CERN wrote, move all the move all the placement groups off it, and then let the balancer move stuff back on. So you can really tightly control how much movement you have going on. And if you want to stop adding new hardware in, you can just turn the balancer off, and you've only got a few placement groups in flight, which is really nice. And it does work really well, but given we were having quite a lot of problems with OSD map creation and upmap, I thought it was easier just not to worry about it this time.
Right. Because I think in our cluster, the balancer kind of fights with us a little bit. We turned it on about 6 months ago, something like that, and we had individualized crush rules for our multi-generational cluster. So basically, the oldest hardware still in the cluster couldn't keep up, so we unweighted it essentially. But I guess I'm just kind of afraid that the balancer is kind of undoing that and putting things is reweighting the old cluster. So
yeah, I'm not completely. You'd have to look at the logic of how it actually works, because I can never quite remember whether it's actually using the utilization of the drive to basically it populates overfull and underfull lists and then tries to move placement groups between them to balance it out on a per pool basis. And I'm not sure if it's using like the crush weight or the actual utilization of the drive there. So I don't have an answer for you, but the code is really readable. It's
okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for sharing.
All right. And I guess while I'm talking, I'm also very interested in the whole moving straight from Luminous to Nautilus. We've sort of been planning for this big cluster, which is now 5.5, 6,000 OSDs. We've been planning to move to Mimic for a long time, but there's been a bunch of stuff, the upmap issue or the OSD map issue, and then a few other things that have really made it made it impossible for us to upgrade. Now we're seriously thinking about it, and it's whether we bother moving to Mimic and then moving straight to Nautilus, which is what we'd end up doing, or whether we just move straight to Nautilus. It will save us so much time if we can do that. But it's obviously, I'd really like someone with a cluster to say, oh yeah, we did that and it was great. At least something to convince people that it is a good idea.
Tom, one question. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, because I had mic issues. Your cluster sounds very similar to mine cluster. We have also over 40 petabytes in our one cluster, and we also are planning in Q1 to upgrade straight from Luminous to Nautilus. And I have one question. Do you have all your OSDs in one pool, or do you have separate pool for different usage?
We have separate pools. We effectively have 3 big users that have separate pools, but all the placement groups are co-located, so all OSDs have all pools on them. We don't have any sort of separation.
Okay, and what is your maximum number of PGs per pool?
I think it's 4,000. It's either 4,000 or 8,000. Oh, 8,192.
4,000 in 40 petabytes cluster?
Yeah, I mean, we've got three big data pools. So we've got somewhere around 20,000 placement groups. Bear in mind these are erasure coded, so these are 11 OSDs per placement group. So the numbers are kind of quite different from if you're talking replication.
And did you notice any problems when you tried to increase the number of placement groups in pool?
So we've done a couple of increases. The pool started out a lot smaller as the cluster was smaller. No real problems. You just have, when we were doing the increases, you just have to take it slow, and the really intense bit is the actual splitting of the placement groups we found. So when you're increasing the PG number, keep it small, so that you're not overloading any of the OSDs and ending up with them blocking requests. But no like issues once you increase the PG num and the backfills had started and everything was peered again. It just went like any other data movement. Just have to make sure you've tuned your backfill so that it's not competing, or it's not causing your client I/O issues.
Okay, for others, last time when we increase from 32 going to 64 thousands of placement groups in our main pool, because we had object storage only on this cluster. We had downtime about 1 hour. Our monitors are completely unresponsive, and they are counting data, probably OSD maps also. We still running Luminous in 2.4 version, and we're planning upgrade firstly to 12 and then to Nautilus without we skipping Mimic. And I was thinking if the problem is the scale of the cluster, or if if the problem is in the number of placement groups and monitor can handle so big numbers.
Yeah, sounds interesting. But no, I don't have an answer.
So be careful in the future.
Yep.
And we also using erasure coding, but 4+2.
All right. Cool.
That just made me wonder, talking about the PGs there and the pool sizes. Is anybody using like the auto scaling PG pool sizing stuff that's in Ceph now? I think that came in. Was that Mimic or Nautilus that came in? So maybe those Luminous clusters, it's not even available for those. Okay, seems like nobody's using that.
Yeah, I think that came in Nautilus, so we're not on that yet.
Yeah, I can't remember one.
Is anyone planning on turning it on when they get there? I guess that might be a good question.
I saw some emails that autoscaler is not working good. Probably Dan sent something. Maybe Julian can tell something about it more.
Well, I guess this will need like Dan to follow up probably. I'm not really sure what's the situation on that topic right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
I got
not turning it on.
I got a Nautilus, two small Nautilus clusters. I could turn it on and see what happens, but they're only like one's half a petabyte-ish, and the other one's just a really small test one. And I guess I could be willing to try it out there and just does. Moving on, it looks like somebody wanted to talk about balancing clusters with multiple generations of hardware.
Right. That was something. Hey, this is Liam. That's something I put in there. We're getting ready to do another buy of new hardware. Part of the reason is that we are still running triplicated. We're not using erasure coding in our Rados Gateway pool. So, and in order to move to that, we would need to basically create a new pool and sync into it. So we would need headroom in order to make that switch. I guess I was just wondering how much other people have different generations of hardware in their clusters, and any special considerations they have to make it work.
I got many generations of hardware in mine. I took the 4 terabyte ones out a little while ago. I used to have 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12 terabyte drives in my cluster, all through different generations of hardware. And with Ceph, it kind of just works. Things got better when I took out the 4 terabyte ones because that wasn't really good hardware, crummy RAID cards or whatever, and it's slow. But
do you use CephFS, Kevin?
A little. We mostly use librados directly, but we do some small amount of CephFS. Maybe only like 50, 100 terabytes of that.
Right. Kind of the biggest problem that we had was when we moved to BlueStore. The old cluster had SSDs that were used for journals previously, and so we get lots of spillover on the oldest nodes.
The RocksDB spillover.
Yeah. RocksDB spillover.
Sure. Was that just because you didn't make the DB devices big enough for when you went to BlueStore, or
I think we were
just limited by that?
By the number of OSDs that we had in the chip. So it just the hardware constraints of that. So one of them could be that we should as we sort of invest, drop some of the OSDs in the oldest generation and give more headroom for those if they still have operational life, or just remove them completely. Obviously, removing them completely is fine, but you lose capacity and or performance, right, with the fewer OSDs and or servers that are participating in the cluster. So, but it's probably a story around moving to BlueStore. We probably needed to sort of constrict the total number of OSDs we're running on that generation of hardware.
Gotcha. How many SSDs did you have for per group of OSDs? Like one SSD for 6 OSDs, or
4 for 20 drives?
Right.
Yeah, I think it's like 4 for 20 drives or 1 for 5.
Right. And this was a while ago, so these were like 128 gig SSDs, something like that.
So they're still have good wear level, but they're not. They're sort of the capacity in terms. They're right at the 40 gig per OSD, like SSD partition per OSD, which is I think right around where the RocksDB sort of gets us a little bit in trouble.
Right. We're just crossing over that 30 gig spillover. Yeah, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Is that causing noticeable problems or slowness, really, or is it just more of a annoyance for you guys?
Yeah, they were having trouble keeping up. I wasn't as involved in kind of tuning this when all this was going on, but that was part of the reason why we had de-weighted that part of the cluster, just to reduce load.
Yeah.
Newer parts of the cluster also have more CPU power.
They have more cores per. Their core ratio is better. cores are better, right? Just in terms of performance.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there any reason why you couldn't so those older ones were designed for you file store and blue store you can run together. Is there anything preventing you from just doing that? Any of the feature sets? I suppose if using erasure coded behind SFFS that would do. But you said you were using replication.
Yeah, I think our goal was to get to replication, and it has been proven challenging just due to the size of the cluster.
Yeah.
So the goal would have been to get to Blue Store and then do a migration to get to it. But even when we have been doing this, we've run into some of the syncing code, some of that syncing code had not. We had some issues. We had just not had a whole lot of time to dig in and resolve it. So we sort of backed off and stayed on the triplication for a while. I'm not sure how many people have had a triplication cluster and then have sort of converted it into erasure coding. That's an interesting question. I'm guessing maybe most people have started with erasure coding in their clusters and have not sort of had to do the conversion process or tried that conversion process. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can speak about that.
I've gone from one erasure coding pool to another, from one parity bit to a pool with 2 parity bits. It's just a long process. But I haven't done a replication to erasure coding. Anybody done that? Guess not.
Nope. Okay.
From my side, you guys are primarily gateway and SFFS, right? You said.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Me, from my pool migration from erasure coding to erasure coding, we're mostly just librados.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's the pools that I migrated.
This
is still on a
would have been an easier
replication.
transition if we were just doing if we didn't have the CephFS bit, because there are just certain performance considerations where we were throttling the sync to go to a new pool with erasure coding, but even when it was throttled, it was putting too much. It was contending too much with what CephFS was trying to use Rados for, and we just couldn't do them both at the same time. So I think it's just going to have to be extra capacity that has not been consumed for anything yet to make it possible to make this jump. So we're waiting.
Yeah, it kind of seems like it in your case. In my case, I didn't need the extra capacity. I just moved the object from one pool and deleted it and kind of updated our databases. All is all happening.
Right.
I just needed a little more because the overhead went from 25 to 33% per object. That was all the extra capacity planning I had to do for that.
Yeah, it sounds like, since you really know what you're doing at the Librados layer, it's kind of easier in that scenario because you don't have a service being supported on top like RGW or, but you're
much easier for us
closer to the pulse of the system. Okay, well, I was just curious.
Cool. Going down the list, CephFS, snapshots, anyone using them? I'm not.
Nope. I had seen some stuff on the mailing list the other day about people asking questions about how many snapshots to keep and how important it is for, how big the deltas are between each one, things like that. I don't know. Doesn't seem like a lot of people are maybe using them.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Another thing, CephFS, scaling to thousands of clients. Got thoughts or insights on that? For me, I got I don't use CephFS heavily, but I've done testing on it. For our compute cluster is about 110 nodes, but it can support, we generally do one job per core, so it's more like 2,500 jobs at once. So it's only 110 nodes hitting CephFS, but there's about 2,500 processes reading or writing from CephFS. So I've done testing where I've kind of, tried librados versus CephFS to see if I can make it fall over. With one MDS, it kind of did fall over, but once I did that up to two MDSs, really had no problems with porting, about 2,500 jobs or so reading and writing the CephFS at the same time. It was actually, speed-wise, it was pretty much comparable to what we do with librados currently.
So one of the things I would sort of say about our experience with we don't even have 100 clients connected to our CephFS, but so what we see is that sort of the amount of caps that can be reserved by the MDSs is sort of a limit, and and this may be part of the in-kernel CephFS client. We're currently running RHEL 7 on the clients, and they are not always smart about giving back their caps. It seems like there's obviously I think there may be some code upstream, and whether or not Red Hat has completely backported it is sort of that's a sort of discussion point always to sort of try to figure out like what's the status of those upstream sort of commits into the current kernel client. But we've hit this point where if we put very large memory nodes up there, they'll sort of cache the Linux file buffer cache essentially is sort of holding open those caps and driving us pretty far up in memory utilization on the MDSs. And we have a 256 gigs or 384 gigs, I don't remember what it is, on each MDS. So it's not like they're sort of totally unprovisioned, but we can get to about 80 million caps or 90 million caps, and then it can get us into trouble. So some of that is sort of, we've dropped file buffer caches before to sort of force the caps releases, but it's
right. We actually have a cron that runs twice daily or something like that to drop caps.
Yeah. So I mean that's something that we've been fighting with a little bit. Maybe the RHEL 8 client we haven't tested a whole lot with could be a solution here, but again it gets back to like how intelligent the kernel is in terms of communicating back with the MDS about what's cache and what's dirty and all that. So.
Interesting.
Yeah. Hopefully it would scale with just adding more MDSs, but
yeah, hopefully. Fortunately, I can't speak much to experience with that.
What does the next one mean? Chasing down scrub errors. So just like how to do the investigation of.
That was my question. We just got an interesting situation where we've had some scrub errors it's a very simple pool setup. It's a replication 3 pool. And what is happening is that we're getting scrubs on some of the PGs, and it was reporting that that there were some scrub errors. I think the reason why we might have been getting the errors was that we were getting the OSDs were flapping because we were hitting memory limits on the machines. We're doing various bits of processing on those machines as well, and we recently upgraded the telescope to be doing more aggressive processing, and so it was taking more memory. So basically, it was the OSDs were flapping the whole time, and that could be the reason. But that put aside, I was still curious to know how you chase down the scrub error. So we basically have a scrub error. I can go and I can find out what the object's called, but how do I know which OSDs they're on? So I know that this particular object is sitting on OSD 3 and it's got a copy of it on OSD 10, let's say. But then I get onto those machines. How do I actually get the actual object off the OSD so that I can do like a comparison of those two particular objects? I couldn't see any tools that I could use that. Back in the when Ceph was still before BlueStore, you could actually go and find the actual file. But now there's no way of actually finding an actual file and getting the file. So I was just wondering if anybody's had any experience with trying to actually read a piece of data off an object.
So was this the two copies agreed and one of the copies did not agree? Was that the error?
Well, actually, it's a bit more of a stranger. Because we had flapping OSDs, there were only two. There's only two copies of that particular object.
It never made it to having a third.
Yeah. So then it comes up. The error I'm getting is it's telling me it's getting a read error. So what it wasn't doing is it wasn't replicating the third replica because it couldn't agree about the data. So then I was thinking, well, let me just figure out what the data is actually saying. But then I couldn't figure out how to actually get the data.
We had a read error that came up in a scrub in the last week, which was a drive that was failing prematurely, but the operating system hadn't really failed it, or Ceph hadn't failed it yet. So it was still trying to accept data, but it was failing, and we replaced the drive and it fixed it. But there could be other reasons why you have a read error.
Yeah. As I say, I mean, I was more curious to try and figure out if I could actually find the object, find my actual data sitting on the actual drive, and what tools there were available to find that. So basically, what I'm doing is I'm kind of lifting the skirts here and kind of looking at what Ceph is actually doing, and going onto the OSD node. And trying to see if I can, how I
usually what I've seen people do when this has come up in the mailing list, usually what people do is they'll rewrite the object, not on the OSD host, but like if it's a CephFS object that's complaining, you can rewrite it out, right? And I think you can also use the Rados tools to do this, to just get the object and then put it again, and it usually will kind of rewrite all the metadata and do the right thing.
Yeah.
Isn't there? I thought there's a tool where you can actually mount the BlueStore like a normal file system and explore it that way.
Yeah.
I swear you can do this with the object store tool. Like there's the Ceph object store tool that you can basically. I feel like I've done this before.
Okay.
Not sure.
Cool. Yeah. So just before this meeting, I did see there's a Ceph object store tool and a Ceph BlueStore tool. So I think those are kind of leading towards the tools where I'm wanting to. So thanks. Yeah. I actually as I say, I just saw that just before the meeting. But those are, I think, the tools I'm looking for. So thanks, Tom. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in the past, for when I was dealing with like scrub errors on file store, I would just find it was usually for me it would be because like basically a bad block developed on the hard drive, and I just go RM that file and then initiate a Ceph PG repair on that PG, and it would fix it for me.
Yeah.
So Kevin, what do you do now? You're on. Sorry, Tom. You go.
Wasn't.
I was just saying, what do you do now you're on Blue Store?
I'm not.
You can't. Yep.
I can't go to Blue Store because we use web Rados and we have objects bigger than 4 gigabytes. I'm that guy.
Yep.
I have my test clusters on Blue Store, but my production, I'm stuck on File Store until I figure something out or start using the Librados striper. We're coming up on the hour mark. If anything else people want to hit real quick or thoughts, closing thoughts. So my last thing was we're being trying months. That means the next one will be in March. But that puts us, really close to CephLCon. So I'm kind of leave it up to people to decide if we want to do this again in March or put it off until April. Anybody have thoughts on that?
Well, as a person who's not going to CephLCon, I would be very happy to have one in March, but depending on what other people think.
That's how I was feeling too. I saw the schedule for CephLCon came out, and when it was in Europe, it looked like there was a pretty good representation from our group of people. But it looks like with the one in Seoul, I think I saw Tom was on a presentation, and then Dan from CERN. But that was pretty much all from the scientific group that I could see that was there. So maybe not as many people are going to that one.
I think March is reasonable on my side, because even on our side, Dan will go, but probably not all of the team, so might be useful anyway.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, we can. I think it's still on the calendar for March. I'll have to double check whatever Mike set up for me. Sure, we'll plan on that. I'll do the same thing where I sent out the mailing list and then the private email as well with everyone on it. People got that one, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, the email was definitely useful. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely had some feedback of, well, it's pretty easy to miss stuff on the Ceph users list, so I got some feedback from a couple people and figured that'd be a good idea. I'll do the same thing for the next one. Other than that, thanks for joining in the call. Feel free to follow up the pad with any questions or notes, or if you want to contact anybody directly about something they said, or if you have any questions for me or whoever, keep a conversation going if you want.
This is awesome, Kevin.
Otherwise,
thanks.
Yeah, no problem. I thought it'd be a use of some time. Otherwise, thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you all in March. And those of you going to South Korea, have fun.
Yeah, thank you, you too. Bye.
Yep.
Thanks, bye.
Cheers. Thanks. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers, Kevin.
Bye.